Well, good afternoon. And Dr. B is back. Sorry about the long hiatus I had there, but we're uh, now going to be talking with uh, Gwen Pauloski, Dr. Pauloski, and we'll start by showing you her book very quickly, I hope.
Mhm.
Technology, please work. Okay, it worked. So her book is Making Deep Sense of Informational Text. Okay, and there are links to this and many other things in the blog. So I'm going to stop the share screen and I'm going to shut up and let Gwen tell us a little bit about yourself, your extensive background, which I was just, you've done teaching, consulting, and writing research articles, and then we'll start discussing the book.
Awesome.
Okay, so Gwen, take it over. It's all you.
All right, Dr. Sam, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So, I think one of the most important things about my background is that I came from a family of educators. My grandmother and my grandfather were both educators in the same district where my mother taught, became a principal, was an instructional supervisor. I taught, my sister taught, our kids went through the system. And so, even as a little girl, where other families might be talking about sports, my family was talking about pedagogy. So I was steeped in it from early on. And so, even as a student, as a kid, I was experiencing kind of that double awareness of myself as a learner and what the teachers were doing. So even though I tried to do other work, I went in a different direction. I was trying to be in public policy. I was a goner. I had to I had to become an educator. It turned out I didn't have a choice in the matter. So I started out as a social studies teacher, and I had had some great history teachers, and that I loved doing that for 9 years. I taught U.S. history and Texas history and a variety of other social studies courses. So I know that you know what it feels like when you realize all these texts that you're giving the kids, they're not making sense of them. You may assign a chapter in your history book, and they come back the next day, and you're ready to talk about it, and you're realizing, uh-oh, they don't know what I'm talking about. And so, if you're like me, um, you figured out what else to do, right? So we would read the text out loud together. Then the technology was such that we could start making PowerPoints. And I started learning how to make web pages. And I was standing on my head trying to figure out how to get my kids to understand what we were supposed to be reading. I finally went to my principal and said, I'm working on reading and writing all of the time. So can you just go ahead and switch me over to reading ELA? And that was the change. I, after 9 years and loved my job, I was the department chair and all that jazz, but I felt like if we don't get the reading and writing part right, these were seventh and eighth graders, then I can teach about John Adams all day long, but I'm not preparing my kids for high school and college. So switched over to ELA. I had some knowledge of content area reading strategies. I know, Dr. Sam, that you did that instruction. And in the late 90s, we were learning about Project Chris, which is now just Chris strategies. And I was all for it. When I switched over to ELA reading, I was reading Chris Tovani's work. I read it, but I don't get it, which changed my life.
And I'm
Um,
just going to put a little chime in here.
yeah,
Chris wrote the a forward to your book. I
yes,
found
she
that
did.
incredibly impressive.
I have told people that if my book only sells 10 copies, the fact that I have Chris Tovani's name on the front of my book is the end. I have achieved the pinnacle of my career. It was an incredible honor for her to agree to even read the book, much less write the forward. So, and it's because when I reached out to her, I told her what a difference she made when I read her book in 2005 because my kids were struggling and I didn't know what to do. These were sixth graders. And then I read this book that says they're fake reading. It's not their fault. They need help. Oh, this is not a will problem. This is a skill problem. Well, I need to learn what to do to help them. And so I actually, before I got really good at that, I was pulled into the district to do professional development at the district level. So I spent the next 9 years working with teachers and principals, campus administrators, trying to help improve teaching and learning on their campuses. So in Houston ISD, there were there were dozens and dozens of schools, middle and high schools, that were struggling, and so I would go in and walk classrooms and sit in classrooms and talk to teachers and observe teachers and do trainings and consult with principals on what what's working and what we need to improve. So then I went back into a school as a 10th grade dean. The school was in Texas, they call it improvement required, but basically under sanction that they better get their English scores up or else, you know. Um, and I found that I knew what to do to help improve those scores. We actually got out of the state sanction after that year. And so I was in other people's classrooms. I wasn't teaching myself, but I was kind of learning how to lead a group of teachers to those improvements. Um, I can't explain all of what went into my decision to return to the classroom, except I had never gotten over missing my students. People would always say, "Oh, you're so lucky. Now you're at the district office. You have so much more influence." I always missed the kids. And so I decided to go back to the classroom. And I spent the last 6 years with seventh to 10th graders. And it was fabulous.
Okay, well, that's just a perfect segue into the next part. And I,
Good.
I would mention that you also have done some research articles.
Yeah, I got my doctorate in there.
Yeah.
Once I went back to the classroom, I decided that I would go ahead and get my doctorate while I was teaching full time. So during the pandemic. So that was fun.
Okay. And I'm playing around with my view right now for just a second here. And so what we're going to do next is get into the meat of it.
Good.
You've mentioned, and I ran into the same problem. I ran into that problem when I was teaching high school. I ran into that very same problem when I was teaching at the university and teaching the
Exactly.
centenary reading. I mean,
Yes.
those university kids had the same things.
Yep.
And I also read
Yeah.
Chris. So, oh, what a help that was.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a huge problem here that's being addressed.
Yeah.
And you spend the first two chapters of your book making a case for this thing called deep sense approach. And I'd just like you to dive into that. Tell me how this helped you solve the problem, how it might help us to solve the problem. And you said that this can be done in a way that gets adolescent readers to regain their confidence. Oh boy,
Yeah.
that's that's all you had to say. You got my
Yeah.
attention. So
Absolutely.
tell us all about what happened during that thing. And I've got a lot of classroom teachers in my audience who are just going chomping at the bit, like you better tell us something. Okay,
Good.
here you're at it. It's all you again.
Good. Awesome. So, as a social studies teacher, as a school administrator, as a teacher trainer and mentor, the big question on every secondary teacher's mind, pretty much in any kind of anyone who has a text-based discipline, is how in the world do we get kids to read and make sense of the text that we need them to read? And how do we get them to express their understanding of the text in the way that we're asking them to, right? Whatever the tasks are that we're giving them. Why isn't it working? Why can't they do this? And I think a lot of folks kind of have a fixed mindset about it. They figure that at least by high school, if not earlier, these kids are supposed to have learned how to do this, right? They should have learned in elementary school. They should have gotten those comprehension strategies. And so by this time in high school or eighth grade, they either are good readers or bad readers. And a lot of, yeah, you know, because you hear it too in the teachers' lounges, you hear, well, they don't care, they're not trying, right? So you got the kids who try and care, and then the kids who don't. What I have found is that it's not that simple. That the kids actually continue to need a lot more support than they typically get. And the reason is, yeah, they learned strategies in elementary school. Those were great when they were reading shorter, more what we call considerate texts, right? They had simpler vocabulary, their topics were often more familiar. The sentences were shorter. They had text features that made everything very clear how the text was structured. And we taught kids, many elementary kids get that teaching, right? How to find the main idea, how to summarize, a text. But then you move to middle, high school, and as you said, college, and the texts get more complex in a number of different ways. Not only do they get longer, the topics are less familiar. The syntax, the sentence structure is a lot more complex. The vocabulary is more difficult. Also, a lot of authors who aren't writing for elementary kids, they don't structure the text as clearly. It's harder to make sense of. And so then we say, well, kid, why aren't you read that chapter? Why aren't you making sense of it? It's because they need more skills. They need to deepen those skills. They need more coaching, more practice in order to update their skill set to be able to deal with those more complicated texts. The other thing is that if you think about the tasks get more complex too, right? That we ask kids to do in middle school, high school, what we ask them to do with the informational text gets more complex. So all of that means kids need help. And so when teachers go to teachers pay teachers, or the district gives them worksheets, and we give those kids the same main idea worksheets that they had in fifth grade, and or we put them on tutorials, we do pullouts, we do all of these things to try to just give them the same material again that they got in elementary school. it's it's not enough. If all we do is have them practice again with short little texts, then when they try to read a chapter, they can't apply what they learn because the skills aren't strong enough. So deep sense tries to get past that problem, that set of problems. And as I said, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but rebuilding the confidence and motivation has to start from the beginning. Because by the time they come into sixth grade or ninth grade or senior year in college, they have a fixed mindset about their reading skills. They either believe that they're not good at it, or the texts are boring, or school is stupid. They don't believe that they can actually make sense of those difficult texts. So one thing that Chris Tavani taught us about in I Read It But I Don't Get It is fake reading. And so I hate to break it to you, but a lot of kids in middle school and high school and college and grad school are fake reading. They are holding the text, they are looking at it. Maybe they are skimming and scanning, looking for the answer to the question that you gave them. They're not actually making sense of the text because they're not actually reading the text. A lot of kids don't even know they're doing that because it's so built in. Um, and so that's the thing we have to break. And that habit that they've developed because they don't know that they can do better. Uh, and so you have talked about in other of your blog posts about explicitly teaching that set of strategies. And and yes, we do. We have to gradual release. What, why, when, and how, we have to teach those strategies. But if all we do is give them a worksheet, that's not going to cut it. They need to be making sense of complex texts that are interesting And this is the third prong, they need to be participating in discussions not only with their peers, but engaging in collegial meaning making with their teachers and their peers.
Okay, and that's a
Well,
perfect place as a segue to the next section.
good.
And I know you're headed there, and I'm very happy about that. Uh, the deep sense approach strategies and focus on meaning making and uh, uh, evaluating arguments and evidence and consolidating learning. So all the now let's get into it. If we're going to teach them strategies, tell us about that. And your book does too, by the way. But
Yeah,
as much as as much as you can in seven
sure.
minutes, have at it.
So I'll tell you that when I was planning my dissertation research in my seventh grade classroom, so I was looking at my own practice, I was pretty confident that I knew what I was doing. I thought that I knew how to teach strategies to students. And I had been working on the literary strategy side, right? So we had been working on using comprehension strategies to make sense of short stories, for instance. So I thought, no brainer for the dissertation research, let's switch over to some informational articles. No problem. I worked very hard to come up with a list of strategies that kids should be learning. And I started trying to teach those strategies in my classroom. And I was just falling on my face, absolutely falling on my face. I would have one little slide and I was trying to activate their background knowledge about the strategy, thinking it was going to take 5 minutes. Okay, guys, remember when? And they're looking at me like flat, blank faces. And I would try to get the conversation going, and they did not know what I was talking about. They didn't have any way of understanding. And I stumbled and started just blah, blah, blah and lecturing, and it was a disaster. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to go find out, oh my God, what do I do with middle school kids? Because this is not working. And so what you see in the book, it's a set of 14 different strategies from your basic pre-reading strategies to, checking for understanding, annotation, all of those basic strategies that we use to make sense of text. But then, as you said, they go on to the more complex, making sense of an argument in an argumentative text, summarizing that type of thing. And so it's a little bit different when your students have heard their teachers talking about annotation since third grade, right? If you're the ninth grade teacher and you say to your students, okay, I'm going to teach you about annotation, you know what they're going to say? Oh man, again, we already know how to annotate, miss. Right? And so what I do in the book and what I do in the learning guides, which are to me the heart of the book, they are student facing, step, 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 but they're written with the respect that these kids, that's, as we say in Texas, it is not their first rodeo. They have heard about annotation. They have been taught how to do main idea, right? So what we're helping them do is develop more sophisticated strategies that are going to work for more complex texts. Um, so that's the kind of short description. Um, do you want me to give you an example of one of those?
I love that. Please.
Okay. So the kids learn how to find the main idea, right? A lot of times in elementary schools, they get those worksheets. They get a short little text, and then they are taught how to find the main idea. Emphasis on find, which means it's already in there, just stated somewhere. So the kids are taught to go look, that's skimming and scanning, at the first paragraph, not read it, not discuss it, not make sense of it. Look at it and find the sentence that states the main idea. In those worksheets, the little text is very well organized. So they find that main idea somewhere in the first paragraph, right? And then they look at the rest of the text, and there's the evidence. Those are the claims. It's all simple. So I was actually trying to get my students to determine the central idea of this article that we had already read through once. And they were blurting out answers, and I'm like, "What? What? Why do you think that? That's not what?" Okay, wait a minute. And here's what I learned to do, and I so encourage people to start asking this question. Tell me how you came up with that. I started asking the kids, tell me what you're thinking. What are you looking at? Well, here's what they were doing in this long article, pages, right? They were looking at the first paragraph and finding a sentence that they thought maybe captured the main idea. We had already read the whole article. There wasn't a sentence in that first paragraph, nor in the second one, because what the author had done, she's a journalist. So her first thing in that article was a little anecdote to catch the reader's attention. There was not a statement of the main idea. So I didn't know what to do. What do you do? And so I had to think about, how do you teach kids to actually make meaning of the whole text and then think through what is the central idea that the author it wants me to understand. That is a whole different level, right, of cognitive complexity. And that means everybody thinking together, working together with that text, discussing over days, and finally, aha, oh, right. And then the kids get the aha. They get that satisfaction of having made sense of a difficult text in a public way where nobody is ashamed because we're all making sense of this hard thing together. And so that's the kind of thing that happens with deep sense. Um, it's messy, it's difficult, and I wrote the book to kind of be that how-to guide for teachers to be able to walk through that.
Okay. That I'm going to chime in here with my own 2 cents worth real quick. Uh, my readers know that I'm a big fan of Tim Rosinski and
Yeah,
all of his work, and
absolutely.
I and he is to me the guru of fluency. And
Yeah,
so what many teachers are thinking is, oh, all this is simply a fluency problem. If we just develop the fluency, everything is going to be solved. Um, and I'm going to include in our text the a graph that Rosinski created that showed the impact of different things. And yes, developing that kind of fluency has an impact, but teaching the strategies has an even larger impact.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not something you ignore. And by the way, if I would want to teach fluency, and that's a whole different thing,
yeah,
but if I would wanted to teach fluency, I would follow Tim's path,
yeah,
not some of the other paths that I'm
yeah.
seeing. So that's
Absolutely.
my two
And
cents worth.
it's important, and I I have checked to make sure that, silent fluency, so reading silently, which is a lot of what we're doing with comprehension strategies, we're helping kids to actually maintain their reader's voice, sustain it as they're reading silently to try to make sense of the text. They're not two separate things. We know that because there's a reason that the first strategy that I teach is focusing the mind. Because if we want to talk about fluency as just parroting words, I've had students come to me as sixth graders, as ninth graders. They had perfect decoding. They could read glibly, right? They could just read aloud a passage with great fluency, and they had no idea what they were even saying. They had no monitoring of meaning. I have seen the same problem with kids reading silently. And so they have to understand that the purpose is not the sound of the words, right? The purpose is the meaning of the words. And so fluency is essential because if we're stumbling over words because our decoding is so slow, is so it's they're struggling with their decoding, so they are just struggling to read the words, then comprehension is agonizing. There is a fluency piece, absolutely. My experience is that my 6th through 12th graders and beyond, most of the kids, the constraint, and I think Pearson talks about this and others, is not fluency but comprehension at the old for older kids. Fluency still needs to be worked on. It still needs to be practiced, absolutely. But it cannot be done without comprehension also being a focus. So that's my
Okay.
2 cents. It's
Right.
not either
And
or, is it?
that's your dollar's worth there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So here we go again. Um, we're I'm going to well, before we move on, I am going to say yes, we have some kids there where we really need to address that,
yeah.
but I'll put a couple of links to the things I've done about Brzezinski's work because I think he's
Good.
got a better handle on it than
Yeah,
anybody.
I agree. I agree. And I've learned a lot from him. And as a secondary literacy teacher, there are students with whom I have had to really, really work one-on-one and in small group on that set of skills as well, for sure.
Okay, now I'm going to see if I can do another screen share correctly. Here's hoping. Share. Okay, and there'll be a link to this, but this is your working page where I'll tell you what, people could spend days here finding out about your author page, your Amazon author page, your pedagogy website, your teaching Substack, and I've subscribed to that. Uh, your research profile and your contact information. So I'm going to put the one link to this in the uh, blog written part. But is there anything more you want to say about this?
So, I am always, as you are, Dr. Sam, always trying to figure out how to counter some of the um, misinformation that's out there that is pulling us in the wrong direction. And a lot of times it's that either or thinking that you were just talking about. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just focus on one thing as literacy teachers at the secondary level? But we can't. Um, there's so many millions of dollars being spent on things that teachers know, oh gosh, if y'all would just let us teach. And so I really have a heart for teachers, especially in this current context. And and so I hope that everything that I write it has the teacher in mind as well as that adolescent learner. Um, the other thing is this stuff is not just for the quote struggling reader that, the bottom 10%. Da, da, da. I have found that most of our students in secondary need more support with their comprehension. It's it just is reality. And so I think that teachers working together to try to just say, okay, this is on us. We got to figure this out. And the resources are there. I hope my book can be a part of those resources. But as you said, there's so many great things out there, um, research-based work that can help. So they're worth it, right? The kids are worth the struggle. And the other thing is, it takes for a career. And plus, I'm still learning. I know you are too, right? We've been at this a long
Absolutely.
time. You've been at it since 70.
Yes.
I've been at it since 91, formally, and I'm still learning. There's I'm learning every day because teaching comprehension, helping kids to learn to read deeply is incredibly complex. It's challenging, it's difficult, and we all have to hold hands and help each other do it better.
Well, I think made by a teacher handbook like yours,
Yeah.
with a lot of practical advice like you give,
Yeah.
are just the correct cup of tea to go for. And again, I want to make it clear, uh, and I think you know this from reading my blogs and the rest. Absolutely, there are some children that need a real focus on decoding, and
Yes,
absolutely, that's what tier two and tier three are for.
that's right.
And there are other things that you can do with tier one, like the
Yeah.
things Rosinski does,
Yeah.
that will get the job done for most. So,
That's right. That's
and
right.
the other thing is, and I will be sure to put the slide in there that shows the effect sizes, and the effect size of strategy teaching is larger
Yeah.
than the effect size for decoding.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean we don't do, that means we do both.
Right.
Okay. We
Exactly.
don't leave one,
Exactly.
we don't
Yeah.
leave one or the other out. It's a huge
That's right.
mistake to leave one or the other out. So
That's
I
right.
just want to make that crystal clear.
Do
Now,
we have time for me to make one more point on that? Because I'll be quiet if
sure,
not.
actually, that brings to me right to my last question. Do you have any other concerns or final thoughts? And that's all you.
Sure. I'll tell you about Anthony, because he was a ninth grader who had been labeled with everything, right? He had been labeled with attentional issues, he had been labeled with dyslexia, and he was with me every day during the pandemic when we were teaching hybrid. So he happened to be in one class where it was just me and him in the room. And I was teaching online and he was sitting right there. And so I got a real chance to watch Anthony. And Anthony had never passed the state test. He's a ninth grader. We start him in third grade in Texas. And I realized that what was keeping Anthony from being successful, because every once in a while he was doing really well on short passages. He was getting a passing score on the comprehension little tests, you know. And I realized his mind was wandering over and over and again. And it occurred to me that I could coach him. This is that first focus your mind strategy. I could coach him and help him to believe, do you know that you're actually capable of doing this? It's just that you have to keep bringing your mind back. And so I was able to work with him on it. You would label him a tier two, right? But the work that I did with him was coaching, it was cognitive coaching. And once he got it, he passed the English 1 test that year. And of course, that's the first one in Texas. That's the one where they have to write a full essay plus all these reading passages, informational text, literary text. He passed the test because there was this one thing keeping him, and everyone had written off Anthony. Oh, he's a goof. He doesn't care. He's just always wandering. He's blurting out, blah, blah, blah. All I did was treat him as the scholar that he really was. And I saw that when he was really, really able to focus, he had everything he needed. Yeah, he needed more strategies, he needed more practice, but he had the basic stuff that he needed to be able to make sense of the text. So, I can talk about strategies all day long, but to be honest with you, the most important thing that we can do is look at each of our learners and trust that it's in there and help them to trust that it's in there. And that even if they have tried and failed over and over again, it's okay. We've got them and they can still be successful.
What a perfect way to bring this to a close. This is, and I'm fiddling with my technology again. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Here we go. Now we're there. Okay. So I have one last silly little thing that I do in my interviews. And we're about to find that out. And that will be our Zoom wave goodbye in just a second. So get ready. And you've got the big smile and everything. And this has been just delightful. And I can say there's links to your book, and there's gold in them there hills in your book. So I hope a lot of my teachers have a look at it. I think some of it, even my fourth and fifth and sixth grade teachers might
Absolutely.
have a look at it.
Yeah, your
So,
upper elementary will
yeah.
get a lot out of this. Yeah.
Okay. So, that all said, it's time for that Zoom wave goodbye. So nice big smile and a nice wave, and here we go.